This meeting is now called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. Adoption of minutes.
Be it resolved that the minutes of the meeting held on February 22nd, 2022 be adopted.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Mennel and Councillor Jones. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing none. Presenting petitions, presentations, and delegations. Oxford, Elgin, and Perth Joint Municipal Paramedic Services Deployment Review. Performance Concepts Consulting. And I'd like to welcome Todd McDonald, President of Performance Concepts Consulting, this morning. And the floor is yours, Todd.
Good morning, Mayor and Council, and I'm joined by my colleague, the Performance Concepts Practice Lead for EMS Services, Mr. John Perneau. We know time is brief. We're going to run you through a high-level scan of the work that we've been doing on behalf of Oxford, Elgin, and Perth EMS under the auspices of the province's municipal modernization program. So the work was funded by the province after an application by the 3 municipalities. And as you can see from the title page, the concept here is integration, sharing, borderless service. And if we could move to the next slide, I'll quickly explain the methodology, how we've done the work, and then I'll quickly run you through our findings and recommendations for Elgin. So as you can see, the front end of this review was very data intensive. So we did a deep dive into the performance analytics of each of the 3 EMS services on a standalone basis, looking at call volumes, response times, system busyness, a whole range of industry standard analytics. We also built out a pretty sophisticated demand forecast, the call volume and in-service time forecast of the work that the workload that Elgin will face moving forward. We did a peer benchmarking scan to see what kind of insights we could gain around service levels and performance. We hit all the right notes with stakeholders that we needed to speak to. We embarked on a shared services review. What common activities or functions could the 3 EMS systems look to do together in order to improve economies of scale and manage cost and quality? And then finally, the borderless service piece of our analysis. If we magically erase the 3 borders and we look at what EMS resources from the 3 services should be doing to support each other, we've developed insights and analysis around that as well. You've all received the report. I appreciate that it was quite a long report, and we'll try and do as good a job as we can of hitting the high points over the next 10 minutes or so. Thank you. Next slide. So in terms of common findings, the good news is that these are 3 competently managed services with very comparable costs of doing business and service levels. The 3 services also compare reasonably well against identified peers, and we have subjected them to that sort of rigorous analysis as well. Not surprisingly, of course, there are border zone overlapping coverage issues that our mapping and borderless service analysis has uncovered. We'll speak to those. And of course, EMS across Ontario is driven by, population growth, by the aging tsunami of our demographics, and by an increasing propensity of people to call EMS for service. And so you can expect robust growth in call volumes and in-service time that will exceed your growth in current value assessment. So EMS continues to be a cost driver of provider budgets. There's certainly an opportunity to improve mutual emergency coverage as your resources get busy across the 3 services, and you can provide coverage for each other during these periods of critical unit availability. and we have developed sort of an inventory and work plan of service sharing opportunities around purchasing, shared staffing and HR, specialty assets, and facilities. Thanks. Next slide. So again, in terms of findings and recommendations, they run the gamut from system performance, the issue of Code 8 movement and workload. This is the movement of ambulances into positions to anticipate the next call rather than react to a call. And there's a lot of movement of resources across the three services to do so. We'll talk about the mutual coverage plan during times of high critical unit busyness. We'll talk about borderless service deployment, in this case between Elgin and Oxford, and of course we'll hit service sharing opportunities as well. Thank you. Next slide. Just need to get that off my page. The base case scenario here, the key here is we're looking at large percentages in Code 3, Code 4 calls, and a large percentage increase in the in-service hours, the work required, the hours of work required to manage those calls. And we have built out in the report, it's explained in the report, an analytics dashboard that acts as sort of the canary in the coal mine, if you will, when certain analytics levels are met. Those will act as triggers for Elgin to consider resourcing increases, strategic resourcing adds across the 10-year horizon of 2022 to 2032. So these will be evidence-based, and they'll be driven by the demand forecasts that we've built out, as well as these analytics triggers. And again, we can, during discussion, if there is discussion, we can delve a little more deeply into how those analytics triggers work. We also know that there's an opportunity to flatten the demand curve. The curve looks quite daunting in the base case scenario, but as we deal with demand management tools, there's an opportunity to reduce those forecast increases. And again, the report goes into quite some detail about the tactics and the opportunities to do that, especially in the second half of the demand forecast. Next slide. Now, when we look at UHA, or system busyness, we know that we need to consider the fact that as the aging demographics of the aging tsunami occur, as there's population growth, that those peak hours of the day in the primary urban areas of your service are analytics that we need to keep a close eye on. And as we looked across the hours of the day analysis, we did find opportunities to tweak operations and deployment to deal with some of these high system busyness spikes between the 2000 and 2200 hours. We made some technical, sort of tactical recommendations around adjustments, and those have been, we think, well received by the chief and his team. Thanks. Next slide. As we said, Code 8, across Ontario, EMS services engage in these proactive Code 8 movements. So ambulances are moving around in the system on a daily basis based on calls as they occur. And again, this is supposed to be predictive, where EMS services are trying to reposition ambulances perhaps out of their bases or to other bases to anticipate the high probability of calls in certain areas. So we know this has a workload impact on paramedics. Paramedics are tired, and they note that they're moving around a lot during the day and not always moving around in a patient care scenario. And we're telling all of our clients now that a cost-benefit analysis of Code 8 movements is probably appropriate. In other words, does Code 8 predictive movement of units really work? When you move them, are they actually then responding to calls subsequently? And are those calls where they predicted they would be? Or in fact, do those calls occur in the areas of their home territory, if you will, that they vacated? So there's lots of open questions around this, and we're recommending a deeper dive into the cost benefit of this industry standard practice. Next slide, thanks. In this case, we know there's an opportunity here during times of critical unit availability to develop an algorithm or a protocol, if you will, for each of these three services to provide coverage to each other. And this mutual coverage plan, the principles and the approach of the plan, which are outlined in detail in our report, would in essence have the three services act as a single service during periods of high critical unit availability. And there would be these three operational zones, and it would facilitate ambulance movement, sort of, imagine the ambulances without decals on them, and all of a sudden, during critical unit availability, we would engage in borderless coverage for each other. And again, we've gone to some detail to sort of set out the terms of engagement for this to occur, and that is in the detailed report. Next slide. So the mapping work that we've done has demonstrated pretty clearly that there is a Tillsonburg to Port Burwell corridor of historic calls in Elgin that are typically responded to in this border zone, if you will, by Oxford, by ambulance resources in Oxford. Robust growth in the Tillsonburg area is going to increasingly put more of a local claim, if you will, on that deployed resource, with additional calls and busyness in the Tillsonburg area. And the opportunity, or the window of opportunity, if you will, for Oxford to cover this corridor is coming to an end due to this growth. And we've come to the conclusion, and we're recommending that Elgin should commit to a phased approach to 24-hour coverage in that Tillsonburg to Port Burwell corridor. We think that we're recommending an initial 12-hour transport unit should replace the PRU, the rapid response unit that doesn't have transport capability, that currently deploys in that area. And we're further recommending that subsequent to that initial investment in 2023, a second 12-hour unit be deployed to, in essence, sort of complete the evolving coverage map of transport units across the county's entire geographic coverage plan. Next slide, please. Service sharing, as I mentioned, the idea here is rather than do it 3 times across 3 services and have lower economies of scale, we want to max out economies of scale by doing carefully targeted activities and functions together, and in doing so, reduce the overall unit costs of doing so and create standardized quality. So we have a whole range of service sharing deals on the hit list, if you will, that we have triaged and put together. They've been carefully reviewed by the chiefs, and we're recommending an ongoing permanent process, a paramedic service sharing working group, if you will, the brain center of implementing these shared service deals, which we think over time can deliver significant benefits to Elgin's paramedic service and its residents and its taxpayers. Next slide. So moving forward, the good news here is that, and I can't emphasize this enough, the culture of innovation and the willingness of these 3 leadership teams, your 3 CAOs and 3 EMS chiefs, to work in a collaborative model is very encouraging. We do this work in a number of places, and it's not always a culture of inclusivity to make this happen. Sometimes, turf wars and other less efficient considerations come to the foreground, not with this group. So we're very encouraged by this culture of collaborative business. There's an opportunity for improved value for money and cost avoidance, operational efficiencies. We have a pathway forward to manage growth and demand management that are coming. I mean, it's coming. And the 3 services working together through this report have deepened their commitment to each other to improve their value for money, to deliver services on a timely basis, to manage risk through their common approach during times of peak busyness. And there's certainly an opportunity for this alternative to mergers. We know mergers generally are deeply unsuccessful in the municipal sector. If my almost 4 decades in the sector have shown me anything, that is the case. And this shared service model is the obvious high value added alternative to mergers. And there is certainly potential for these 3 services to add neighboring services into this collaborative business model moving forward. So well done to the 3 services, and there is a blueprint for improvement clearly set out in the report.
Todd, I'm going to turn over to council. Do you have any questions for Todd? Councillor Martin?
Yes, at the end, it says there's a potential for including other municipal partners, because when I look at the map, it looks to me like Middlesex should very definitely be included in this to benefit West Elgin, et cetera, because West Elgin is certainly nowhere near, the Oxford and Perth boundaries. So I'm just wondering, why we didn't consider Middlesex in the beginning, just so I understand, and how we would work toward getting Middlesex working with us.
We certainly not in our mandate to evaluate the critical mass of starting in this exercise, how many municipalities should have, quote, been at the table. What I will note, though, is that the group that has started, because of the strong operational and service level similarities that they display to each other, have definitely moved the bar and started to build momentum. I suppose it's open to speculation about whether a significantly larger service like Middlesex, what their inclusion at the beginning of this exercise might have had on the chemistry of the group. But certainly moving forward, Councillor, I know that the 3 chiefs are open and welcoming of expanding this efficiency-inducing club. And you're quite right. When you look at the map, the next obvious participants become pretty clear.
Are there any further questions for Todd? Go ahead, Councillor McPhail.
Was part of your study, I don't see any reference to dispatch and how it's working amongst the 3 municipalities. Is it sufficient? Is there room for improvement there? Has there been any thought to the dispatch and how it operates within our organization?
Through the chair to the member, my colleague John Perneau led our stakeholder discussions, and I'm going to let John share his observations and findings, because I know he spoke to dispatch. And John, let me throw that question to you to comment on the role of dispatch in the work we did.
Thanks, Todd. And as the councillor will know, dispatch for ambulance services in the province is run by the province. It's run by the Ministry of Health. And there isn't an opportunity right now for any fine tuning of that arrangement, if you like. We did speak with the dispatch manager at some length, and we're actually underwhelmed. She was very satisfied with the arrangements with these 3 municipalities and the cooperation with these 3 municipalities and their policies for deployment. So there were no obvious concerns with that relationship as well. In terms of improving the dispatch relationship, there is quite a bit of discussion in our report about moving to AMPDS, which is a new triaging system for identifying emergency calls and how that would affect dispatching in this area. So there is some work being done on that, and things like alternative destinations that impact both dispatch and our operations. But overall, if you were talking about did we look at an opportunity for the municipalities to take over dispatch, that wasn't part of our mandate.
Go ahead.
Well, it's certainly, I guess, when you're talking about the positioning of the vehicles across our combined network, having had the opportunity to look at how Medivh does it in Prince Edward Island. It is under their control. They have the ability to move their vehicles where they feel that they're going to be best suited. Is it a situation where you find that the province has that ability to work with our service providers to make it user-friendly for them to move vehicles around where they need to be?
They do. They basically follow the direction of the services. So if a service says, I want my vehicle to move when this happens, or I want, Oxford to come into Elgin when Elgin gets to this level of vehicles, that's certainly an acceptable practice. And they're quite interested in what we've developed as a mutual coverage plan and are willing to implement it, with no problems, if you like.
Are there any
John-
further questions? Oh, sorry.
No,
Todd, did you have
I
a
was late
comment?
breaking. I was late breaking there. I apologize. Just a supplementary comment to John's point about dispatch. Dispatch and the new MPDS algorithm, the checklist that they will use to decide whether a call is urgent or less urgent, more or less urgent, is going to be an important part of managing the demand curve in the second half of the forecast, because it will essentially break the code 4 calls, which are the bulk of your calls now, into additional urgency buckets, if you will, that can then be triaged in a different way than they are now. And lower priority calls will be able to be queued for some period of time during periods of system busyness. The tool, the dispatch tool now is very blunt. It doesn't do a great job of triaging calls into useful urgency buckets. Rather, it over analyzes them all into one big bucket. Not terribly helpful. So we're hopeful that the evolving sophistication of dispatch will help manage demand and response times moving forward once this new tool is implemented across the province.
Councillor Jaguar, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Warden. Through you, 2 questions. So in the report, you state clearly that shared services are much better than mergers in terms of delivering efficiencies and cost savings. And you mentioned a number of other municipalities who have gone through this. So have you or have any savings or efficiencies been quantified and documented yet? And I'm also curious, assuming no model is perfect, are there risks or challenges that are emerging in those adopting that model?
Thanks for your question. Through the chair to the councillor. And she knows from her background at the local level that service sharing among East Elgin partners can certainly yield benefits. And we think that service sharing among these 3 services can also yield benefits. So we have developed a prioritized implementation pathway for these service sharing opportunities. We have not delved deeply enough into these opportunities as sort of blueprints that are ready to go. So they don't each have cost avoidance quantified numbers against them yet, but that would be the mandate of the shared services working group, to develop the specific implementation business cases, including the numbers about, so instead of adopting a specialty service addition that would cost $100, by dividing it in 3, you get access to, for instance, a specialty service of some sort that now costs you $35 instead. I mean, that the math around economies of scale, I think, will end up being fairly clear. It's just a question now of sort of doing that math with each of the specific deals as they come forward under the rubric of the 3 chiefs. So that's still to come, Councillor.
Are there any further questions? Go ahead,
This
Councillor.
one, we're not to want to belabor this at all, but in your study, has there ever been, what I'm seeing is that I'm receiving more fire calls that are related to EMS delays. And as we all know, that comes with an additional cost to the taxpayers, whether it's an EMS vehicle responding or the fire department responding. Has that ever been tracked of how many dollars that municipalities are spending because of EMS delays?
That calculation is not present in our report. What I would note, however, is that the strategic addition of the phase 24-hour coverage in the corridor that we're referencing will reduce the ripple effect of ambulances from other places, other locations in Elgin, from having to move towards those calls. In doing that, they will remain more often in their designated patrol zones, and you can expect to see their response times in those patrol zones to be positively impacted. So there will be a ripple effect of benefit by adding the resource, not just in the corridor, but in the rest of the county as well. John, any supplementary comment on that?
No, not really. Other than to say that it's a municipal decision or a system decision, if you like, as to when a fire truck is dispatched. So you basically determine what the delay period is before you want a fire truck to respond. So if you're happy with an ambulance coming in 15 minutes and not sending a fire truck, you can implement that protocol. And again, those protocols weren't part of our sort of our review here, but each municipality can set those protocols to deliver the best combination of quality patient care and lessened impact on the fire departments as well.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you, Todd and John. It was a great report, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Resolution, please.
Be it resolved that the presentation titled Oxford Elgin Perth Joint Municipal Paramedic Services Deployment Review from Performance Concepts Consulting be received and filed.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ketchapaw, and seconded by Deputy Warden Marks. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Committee of the Whole.
Be it resolved that we do now move into Committee of the Whole.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Jiguer and Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that's carried. Reports of council, outside boards and staff.
Warden's report, be it resolved that the report titled Warden's Activity Report for February and COVID-19 Update dated February 28th, 2022 from Warden French be received and filed for information.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Jones, and seconded by Councillor Purcell. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is the Tree Commissioner Weed Inspector Quarterly Report, October to December 2021.
Be it resolved that the report titled Tree Commissioner Weed Inspector Quarterly Report October to December 2021 dated February 15th, 2022 from the Tree Commissioner and Weed Inspector be received and filed for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Jones and Councillor Martin, and I'll turn it over to Jeff. Good morning, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Warden, and good morning to you and the rest of Elgin County Council. Before you is my report for the fourth quarter of 2021, outlining numbers for logging operations and clearing applications received, and weed inspection or weed complaints received. As you can see from my report, the number of applications received for harvest in the fourth quarter were fairly consistent with 2020 numbers. The total volume of trees harvested was up a little bit, and the number of acres was down a little bit from 2020. There was one application received for a clearing application in the fourth quarter for about 0.1 acres, and that was still in the review process, the public review process at the time this report was being written. So no weed complaints were received during that period. As far as industry news, I just wanted to bring to your attention, Canada fleabane has kind of become an issue in the county, or is becoming more of an issue, I believe. I did receive a number of complaints this past growing season about weed complaints that were primarily just Canada fleabane infestations on larger parcels of farmland. Canada fleabane is not listed as a noxious weed in the province, as it isn't controlled by the Weed Control Act. So there is challenges with controlling it, because it is becoming a little bit more resistant to a lot of the herbicides that are being used. So there are some different techniques and controls that need to be used to control it. But I just thought I'd bring it to your attention that I have received a number of complaints specifically about Canada fleabane over the last growing season. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions for Jeff on this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Tree Commissioner Weed Inspector Year-End Report 2021.
Be it resolved that the report titled Tree Commissioner Weed Inspector Year-End Report 2021 dated February 15th, 2022 from the Tree Commissioner and Weed Inspector be received and filed for information.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ketchupah and Councillor Martin. And I'll turn this back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Numbers for 2021 are on the report before you. Harvest applications were up a little bit from 2020. I believe most of those were actually the first 3 months of 2021. A lot of the number of applications per municipality were fairly consistent, with big increases being noticed in Dunwich and in Malahide. The total volume harvested was fairly consistent over the 2 years, and the area of harvest was actually quite a bit more than 2020. 4 applications to clear were received in 2021 for approximately a little more than 1 acre to be cleared. 3 of them were received conditional nonconformity with the Elgin County's no net loss policy, and that 4th one in Malahide, as I noted in my previous report, was still in the review process. 2 of these clearings were in central Elgin, 1 was in South Wold, and that other one was in Malahide, as I mentioned. A total of 14 complaints for weeds were received over the 2021 season. This is pretty consistent with the 2020 season. No weed destruction orders were issued in 2021. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, the annual weed inspectors annual conference was held virtually. That included an online certification, and the annual meeting of tree by law enforcement officials and officers wasn't held this year, so there wasn't one to attend. So I hope that there will be one for this year coming up. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions for Jeff? Go ahead, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Just a little off topic, Jeff. Is there a protocol established to deal with a large infection of gypsy moths? I know last year was certainly something that I did see in Middlesex County, in Skunks Misery. There was quite heavy devastation of the tree cover there. I know the trees can handle that for a little while, but is it something in Elgin here that if we're in a situation that we need to act, that we don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what we're going to do? That we've got
Not to the best of my knowledge. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Not to the best of my knowledge is there a collective approach across the county. I know I've talked to a couple municipal staff that might be interested in it, and we have names ready to call if necessary. I know a lot of the reports I've read over the past few months have indicated that the expectation is that gypsy moth, cross your fingers on this one, won't be as much of an issue this upcoming season. The expectation is the natural parasite and viruses that control the moth will be at such a level that it should control it and decrease the volume of the bug.
Just a situation, because I have witnessed over the last couple of years when there is a problem, by the time the collective minds can get around to maybe what we can or cannot do for the solution, well, then the problem is too late and people just suffer with the problem. So I would much rather be in a situation where we have those remedies at our fingertips, and if it needs to be applied, we don't spend a lot of time looking through files trying to figure out what to do.
That's right. Maybe what I can do is volunteer to send a reminder to the CAOs of each of the lower tier municipalities and just with a few names, just as a reminder, maybe to reach out if they're hoping to do something.
Julie, go ahead, please.
With council direction, we can prepare a follow-up report that would detail what a coordinated approach would look like and what our strategy is.
Are there any further questions concerning this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is, sorry, Councillor Jiguer.
I'm wondering if staff need direction, should we pass a resolution to give direction to prepare a report?
Okay.
So we can amend that the report be received and filed, and further that staff be directed to bring forward a report at a future council meeting that contemplates a countywide strategy for the treatment of gypsy moths.
Is that okay with council?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the next item is Heart Health Month Contest.
Be it resolved that the report titled Heart Health Month Contest dated March 8th, 2022 from the Manager of Human Resources be received and filed for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Mennel, and seconded by Councillor Jiguer. Is Stephanie here today? Oh, there you are, Stephanie. Sorry, I didn't see you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to be here just to give a brief overview of the report and the contest itself. Before I turn it back to Warden French to announce the winners, I will provide a brief overview. As we all know, human resources are an organization's most valuable asset, and as such, the human resources team is trying to provide some fun and innovative ways to get the importance of health and safety tips out. And we're including those into the CAO weekly communications. Since February is nationally known as Heart Month, we decided to do February as the tip to focus on heart safety and heart health. Staff also recognize the importance of engaging youth in our community, and as well as to provide something fun for them to participate in. And so what we came up with is this the Heart Smart Kids Heart Contest, Valentine Contest, and it was shared with staff and council to share with the children in their lives. We received 6 very unique and very creative submissions, and we hope to continue to find ways to engage the youth as well as find innovative ways to send out health and safety messages to our staff. This staff report is for your information only, and with that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions concerning this report? Seeing none, now I get the fun part. So the contest winners are Bria Godby, grade 4, Eden Thompson, grade 3, Jack Duncan, junior kindergarten, Rome Duncan, age 3, Juliet Little, grade 3, and Lily Saxby, junior kindergarten. And I'd like to congratulate all the winners, and they did an awesome job. And thank you very much, Stephanie.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item is setting the framework for library lease renewals.
Resolved that the presentation titled Setting the Framework for Library Lease Renewals dated March 8th, 2022 from the Director of Community and Cultural Services be received and filed, and that Elgin County Council provide direction on the matter of establishing common terms and a common base rate for all 10 library facilities, and that notice be provided to local municipal partners and the Port Stanley Festival Theatre regarding the need to execute new lease agreements for Elgin County Library branches by the end of 2022.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Jones and Councillor Purcell. Good morning, Brian, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Warden, and through you to Council. Yes, so there's a lot of information here for you today, and I'll provide a higher level summary. Of course, you've had these slides to consider, but leases for library branches expire at the end of 2022. And council now has an opportunity to establish a framework for the next version of these leases. This overview is seeking council's direction on a path forward for these renewals and whether council supports standardizing all 10 locations, establishing a new base rate, and payments in the term of the lease and any renewals. I provided you with an overview of some of the branch updates we've done recently and in partnership with our local municipal partners. One of the things that, of course, you'll note through these is the improvements that we've been able to make to accessibility in many of our branches and working through funds like the Enabling Accessibility Fund. And so these leases have been working very well in that regard. Go to the background. I've also provided you with background about our current leases, which do establish a tenant-landlord relationship between the county and our local municipal partners and the Port Stanley Festival Theatre. Overall, these leases, again, have worked very well for both parties, inspiring those branch improvements, and I think the key part is making roles and responsibilities very clear regarding use of these buildings. With the lease payments. Currently, as you can see, we have different payments that are being applied based on when the lease was actually adopted. And we also have Elmer, which is on a separate 40-year lease and is currently receiving $7 per square foot. So one of the issues to contemplate in this renewal is looking at standardizing these rates. As far as peer comparisons, payments to local municipal partners is common practice in county library systems. And while the county's payments are certainly the highest, in polling my colleagues on this matter, at least 3 spoke to the desire to have clearer terms in exchange for fixed payments and a desire to replicate what Elgin already has in place. We've also provided you with a summary of a market analysis that was completed for this building in 2018 regarding space footage lease rates and 2022 rates, which are in the vicinity of $18.20 per square foot, to give you some context about proposed lease payments for library branches. There is a strong case to standardize these leases and the base payments, and I've laid those arguments out for you. A key one is the recommendations of the service delivery review to eliminate inefficient processes that will likely result in variable, if variable payments are applied based on local market factors. We've always treated our branches equally in terms of our approach to service and deployment of those services and how we work with our local municipal partners, and we are recommending that this approach be continued and that these rates actually be standardized. Case for 17. One more, yeah. Should council wish to standardize leases and make payments consistent, council may wish to establish $17 as the new base rate, which will be a slight increase to most of the current payments we are making, but sustainable. This gives us an opportunity to bring all branches up to the level of this base rate for the very first time, so that investments into local branches are consistent. And I've provided you with the financial impact, the proposed financial impact of this base rate, most of which will be due to bringing Elmer up to these lease payments, which will be inevitable should Elmer adopt that standard lease, regardless of the path that council chooses. The status quo of $7 a square foot, I don't think will be renewed going forward. Other issues. I've also outlined other issues we could address as part of these renewals, particularly flexibility to house library spaces for other community services, even when the branch is closed. As we do know, there are service agencies that may value using these spaces during off hours. However, we'll have to assess things like liability and insurance as we go forward with that, but certainly it is a goal to consider in these renewals. Next slide. We've laid out options for council to consider to guide our next steps in this process. We do recommend a 5-year term with subsequent renewals to give us the stability to operate the service and plan improvements, but at the same time allowing for the necessary flexibility to amend leases should opportunities for new or relocated facilities emerge. I've outlined the path forward for these renewals. Should council today give us that direction? It will take several months to get these lease agreements in place and to make sure we do that well before they expire at the end of the year. I think we're off to a good start, to a good meeting with local CEOs to present this information and an indication that there's general support for moving forward on this path. So the recommendations are before you, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Councillor Mennel.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Certainly, I support option number one. I think that the fact that all the leases are coming due in 2022, that we standardize everything across the county, and certainly I would support option one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mennel. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Manel. I think that's the fairest way. I believe all of our facilities are fairly even across the board as far as what we offer in each municipality. So at one point, we weren't like that, but obviously Elmer's going to be coming along with something new here soon, I hear. So I would fully support standardization. Just one question, probably to Brian. What are we charging per square foot in the building here for leases?
Through you, Madam Warden, I don't have that information offhand, but I'd be happy to follow up.
Just to.
I can.
Go ahead, Julie.
It ranges between $15 a square foot and $18 a square foot, just
So it's
as to give you an approximate range.
17. Fair.
Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor McPhail.
As we go through this process of renegotiating the leases and put my county hat on, is there any consideration or any necessity given to more responsibilities put to the leaseholders to provide to the county for these facilities? Is that going to be part of the, are there things that as lower tier municipalities that we should be looking at improving, because the leases are pretty good for a lot of small town lease rates, and as long as we as the owners are providing all the necessities for our libraries, is it going to be comprehensive, or are we just giving more money?
Yeah, through you, Madam Warden, to Councilor McPhail. I mean, it's one of the issues that we will address is maybe more regular capital maintenance expectations, and in discussion with engineering staff, that's one of the things that is done here with our leases, where there's a assurance provided that paint will be done in a certain period and that those kinds of things. So certainly that's an issue that we want to integrate into these leases so that we actually have a planned and coordinated approach to that, and an expectation of service for some of those lease payments.
Are there any further questions? So what you're looking for, Brian, is the option, and obviously it looks like council is going with option one. Is there anything further, Julie, that council needs to discuss to make sure that staff have all the information they need?
No, that is what we were seeking today. Thank you.
Okay. With no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Brian. Next item up is execution of lease extension agreement for Aylmer Library.
Be it resolved that the Warden and Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to execute a lease agreement, or a lease extension, for Aylmer Library with the Town of Aylmer to expire on December 31st, 2022.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ketchaba and Councillor Martin. And I'll turn it over to you, Brian. It's pretty clear, but maybe you want to give an overview.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Madam Warden. Through you to council. This just authorizes the execution of the lease that council previously agreed to extend. Aylmer Town Council's done the same, and this is to satisfy the county solicitor who wants every I dotted and T crossed. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Again, Brian. The next item up is parking bylaw amendment.
Be Be it resolved that the report titled Parking Bylaw Amendment, John Street, County Road 73, dated February 28th, 2022, from the General Manager of Engineering, Planning and Enterprise be received and filed, and that bylaw 20-05, being a consolidated bylaw for the regulation of traffic, including parking on county roads, be amended to include 20.33 County Road number 73, John Street, west side from the north property limits of Walnut Street for a distance of 20 meters northerly.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Counselor Martin, and seconded by Counselor Jones. And I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Warren. Through you to council. This report is before you upon receipt of a concern from a resident. The recommendation is before you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Go ahead, Deputy Warden Marks.
I have no problem with it. I'm just curious, has anything changed? Like, was this a problem 20 years ago that's just sort of, because no one complained, it hasn't been fixed? Or is there something that's happened recently to make it a problem?
Through you, Madam Warren, to Deputy Warden Marks. This is in response to concerns recently expressed by a couple members of the community that have noted this to engineering within recent history.
Do you think it was a problem 20 years ago that wasn't brought to our attention? I just wondered why all of a sudden it's a problem. I'm not disagreeing with it.
Yeah, it's likely the case that we weren't aware of any sort of concern.
Counselor Jiguer?
Madam Warden, based on the other report in today's package on the transportation master plan, I would also speculate that the traffic, the number of cars, making it more difficult to navigate that intersection is why this is coming up now as opposed to 20 years ago.
Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The next item up is Transportation Master Plan, Phase 1 Report.
Be it resolved that the report titled Transportation Master Plan Phase 1 Report dated March 8th, 2022, from the General Manager of Engineering, Planning and Enterprise be received and filed.
Someone to move and someone to second. Counselor Mena, seconded by Counselor Jiguer. And I'll turn it over to you, Brian, and this is a big one.
Thank you, Madam Warren. Council, this, I apologize, it was a lengthy report, 187 pages, but I hope council members found the information and data quite valuable. I know at staff level, we certainly did. It brought to light a lot of interesting statistics and things for us to consider as we move forward. This is the first of 4 phased reports. This will not be the last time council has an opportunity to provide their input, but at this time, we certainly would welcome that input. I remind council as well that this study follows the municipal class environmental assessment process, and that is a public process. And along the way, we have been engaging the public proactively and the various stakeholders. Various working groups have been established both amongst our municipal partners as well as cycling advocates and road users in that regard. Phase 1 report identifies needs and opportunities which have now been completed. This report also details next steps with respect to the study process. With that, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions for Brian? Counselor Jiguer?
Thank you, Madam Warden. Just a comment. So yes, very, very good report. It was nice to see the level of engagement and the input in reviewing the opportunities and the needs that have been expressed. I went back to the goals and vision for the overall plan, and it made me realize that later on, when we're looking at specific actions or recommendations, we may want to revisit those goals in terms of perhaps having to prioritize, because this has a little bit of, trying to please everyone. And we know that's not always possible. So I think it will be valuable at some point and count on staff to indicate like which part of the process where we might be able to revisit if we have competing needs and priorities. How do we want to perhaps put different weight on efficiency versus safety versus access. Sometimes you can't do it all. So just a comment, thank you.
Deputy Warden Marks.
Just a comment, there was a lot of valuable information, and you can read that for another 4 days, but I can remember 2007, I think, sitting on county council, asking for a turning lane on Highbury Ave at Ferguson Line. And at that time, it was they actually said, well, we'd look at it within the next couple of years, and they did. I thought it was quite dangerous. I traveled it many times. And now let's see where we are now. They put a traffic signal there. There's one at Ron McNeil. And just the busyness of our road network to the north of St. Thomas. And it's not going to get any easier. So it's just reading that in there and seeing the number of collisions and stuff. We have some trouble spots, but it's nice to see it noted there. But I'm just 2007, 2008 isn't that long ago. And, I don't think we could believe it. We should have had that signal there a long time ago. And all we were asking at that time was turning lane.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor McPhail.
Through you, Madam Warden, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think we really should be focusing on walking trails because the price of gas is getting. Gonna need a lot of them before long.
More bike lanes.
Go ahead, Councillor Jones.
It's, when I seen the study for Wonderland in that area, any updates on that? I know it's still in progress. Heard anything back from the study?
Yeah, through you, Madam Warren, to Councillor Jones, I expect to be able to table the draft study report at some point in the next month or two. That's the anticipation. Staff are still continuing to work with MTO staff on finalizing and the recommendation proposal. Stay tuned.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
We need electric cars. Then you won't have to worry about it. I don't care what they do with the gas prices.
Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Brian. The next item up is COVID-19 emergency team planning.
Be it resolved that the report titled COVID-19 Emergency Team Planning February Update dated March 2nd, 2022 from the Chief Administrative Officer be received and filed.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Martin, and seconded by Councillor Jones. And I'll turn it over to you, Julie.
Thank you. I think this report is fairly self-explanatory. It simply provides an update on our operational response to COVID-19. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions council might have.
Are there any questions for Julie? Sorry, did you have your hand?
No,
Okay.
I was moving my glass.
Okay. Seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. And the next item up is 2022 Action Plan, Elgin County Council.
Be it resolved that the report titled 2022 Action Plan, Elgin County Council dated March 1st, 2022 from the Chief Administrative Officer be received and filed. And that council approve the 2022 Action Plan as presented.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ketchapa and Councillor Purcell. And I'll turn this over to you, Julie, please.
County Council met on January 31st and again on February 22nd to review the outcomes of their 2021 action plan and discuss action items for inclusion in the 2022 plan. And these actions are detailed in the report that is included in your agenda today. A summary of performance outcomes associated with Council's 2021 action plan is currently being developed and will be presented to Council, by extension, our community, very soon. As well, we hope to dovetail the 2022 staff action and operational plan with Council's action plan for presentation and approval by Council at a future meeting. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Julie. Are there any questions for Julie? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. The next item up is Rural Education Task Force Draft Report.
Whereas Councillor Martin, an Elgin County Council appointed representative of the Thames Valley District School Board's Rural Education Task Force, requested that a copy of the Rural Education Task Force draft report be presented to Elgin County Council at its meeting on March 8th, 2022. And whereas Councillor Martin is seeking council's support in principle for the Rural Education Task Force draft report, it is understood that the report has not yet been presented and approved by the Thames Valley District School Board, and it is anticipated that the Rural Education Task Force final report will be presented to County Council at a future meeting for formal endorsement. Now therefore be it resolved that the report titled Rural Education Task Force Draft Report dated March 2nd, 2022 from the Chief Administrative Officer be received and filed, and that Elgin County Council review the draft Rural Education Task Force report and indicate its support for the report in principle, and further that the warden be directed to send a letter to the Thames Valley District School Board relaying County Council's support in principle for the Rural Education Task Force draft report.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Warden Marks and Councillor Mennel. And I'll turn it over to you, Councillor Martin.
Yes, and I had not intended to say too much, other than we wanted your support in principle, so we wanted you to realize it's been about 3 years we've been working on this, and we've consulted with, we had in the think tank, well over 1,500 people involved. We did public meetings, as you know, and we did 7, 3 here in Elgin, and we had 400 and some odd people attend those. So we've been trying to consult with everyone, and this is what we came up with, what our people in our communities feel is needed to keep our rural schools open and viable. And so that's what the report is. I hadn't intended to say much more than that, but you probably saw in the news last night that Marcus Ryan was on the news last night speaking about this. And what happened was in January the 10th, we actually came up with this draft proposal. We were supposed to go back and look through and make sure that everything was, that there were no errors in it or grammatical errors or anything, and any recommendations. And that was to the whole committee. The problem was when the next meeting came up, 2 staff members decided to cancel the meeting. Not the board. It had nothing to do with the board. That's where I objected to the report. It kept saying the board. The board has not been a problem. These 2 staff members sat on the committee for the whole time. They could have, we didn't know what their objections were, but they wanted to meet with Arlene Morel, who happens to be the chair of this committee, separately with just staff. And so she felt that it should be the whole committee that met. That was all. So the whole, anyway, we have not yet been able to have a meeting to finalize the report. So that's, we just wanted you as your representative, I wanted you to have a chance to see the report. Do you think it's a good one? Should we adopt it in principle? It is not a final thing. It may well be turned down. We have no idea. But we just wanted to bring this to you so that you could see the draft report and what we were recommending.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Martin. Go ahead, Councillor Ketchapah.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Just a question through you to Councillor Martin. Can the objective be met by simply this council receiving the report and not adopting the principle at this time? If the objective is simply to leak the report out.
It wasn't leaked, it was on the website. This has been public document all along.
Forgive my choice of words. It has not been endorsed by Thames Valley, but that's what I'm getting at. I'm wondering if we're getting the cart before the horse, but simply by this council receiving it, we've seen it, and then we can compare it with a final report that comes from Thames Valley.
I think the objective was, and this was, there is a representative, of course, from Oxford County and from Middlesex County. And the 4 board members that sit on this committee felt that it might hold some sway with the board when it came before the board on the 22nd of March. That's when it's supposed to come before the board, at the final report. to know that the 3 municipal counties do endorse this and think that it is a worthwhile plan, just to help support it when it comes before the board. That was all. If you don't think it's, worth that, that's up to you. This is going before Middlesex County today as well, and Oxford County tomorrow. And the recommendation from the 3 county councillors and the 4 board members was that they would like you to approve of it in principle.
Go ahead, Councillor
Just to
Ketchum.
clarify, this was a request from the task force that these municipalities have access to the report at this time.
That's correct. The 7 voting members of the task force requested this.
That's kind of contradictory from what I understand from the message we received from the CAO yesterday.
To my knowledge, the request came from Councillor Martin through you, Madam Warden.
Okay, and there was the whole, I apologize for that. It was the 3 county council reps from the 3 counties and the 4 board members, which are Arlene Morel, Sean Hunt, they're from Middlesex County, Megan Ruddick, and Bruce Smith from Elgin County, are the 4 reps on the rural initiative, or the Rural Education Task Force. They met, and this was their agreed upon.
Councillor McPhail.
I guess I look at this kind of a question that I'd ask everyone here, that if this council commissioned a report either from a standing committee or from a consulting, and that report come out and was asked for comments before it come to this table, we'd all be screaming bloody murder.
Are there any further comments? Deputy Warden Marks.
I have to agree with that. I'd get pretty upset if the school board started to tell us what to do.
Did you have a comment, Councillor Purcell?
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment to our motion and simply receive and file.
I'll second that.
Councillor Martin?
And that's, it's your prerogative to do as you wish. This is going, as I say, before the others, for their support. It's just saying that you, who appointed me there, have read the report. It's draft only. Are there things in there that you think are good or strong and that should be supported? And I fear the school board, as you know, on the 22nd, they're also voting on giving London 7 members and the rural municipalities 5 members on the school board in the future. And so I think it's very important that this come before that change occurs, if there's any support for it. So it's entirely up to you what you wish to do, but it's strictly a draft report, and all it's asking for is, do you think it's a good report or not? Do you endorse it?
Deputy Warden Marks.
I will say, as warden last year, I attended the 3 meetings in Elgin County. I was impressed by the work that was being done. I was impressed by the participation. There was a lot of compassion, passion. I think it was a very worthwhile project, but I'm willing to support the motion as amended.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First, I would like council to know that I had a long conversation with the chair of the Thames Valley District School Board yesterday. And I told her that our place as Elgin County is to collaborate, communicate, and cooperate. We're not here to cause trouble. I explained to Lori Ann that our representative, who is Councillor Martin, we appointed her. And so she's done her job and she's brought the information back to us. In turn, I mentioned to Lori Ann that it's up to the Thames Valley District School Board. They're the ones that'll do the deep dive. They're the ones that'll pick this report apart. And when they come up with whatever it is they feel comfortable with, that's when we get to actually approve it. So I reassured her that we're only trying to collaborate and that Councillor Martin has done her job as a councillor by bringing this forward. Really, we don't even have to talk about this today. We've all had the opportunity to read the report. And it's not our job to decide what's good or what isn't good about the report. That is up to the Thames Valley District School Board. So I think that Councillor Martin and their group have done a great job. They've done what they were asked to do, and now we leave it be. And I don't care how we approach it, like, as Councillor Purcell said, whatever council's comfortable with. But I just want you to understand that I don't think there's anything contentious here from Elgin County. That's my take on it. And I felt when I finished talking to the chair that we had a great conversation, and I felt really good about it. So that's just my take on it. Councillor Martin?
Just, there are 7 members of staff, the Board of Education staff on this committee. They sit as advisors on this committee, and so they've had input throughout the whole time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments about this? So Julie, I'll have you read, because Councillor Purcell has suggested something different. Could you read what he suggested?
Certainly. So the preamble would stay status quo. And now therefore be it resolved that the report titled Rural Education Task Force Draft Report dated March 2nd, 2022 from the Chief Administrative Officer be received and filed, and that Elgin County Council receive and file the draft Rural Education Task Force document.
Okay, the people that moved and seconded this, are you okay with this? Now that Julie's read it, okay? All right, with no further questions or comments, are we fine to vote now on this resolution? Okay, go ahead, we'll take the vote. All those in, do you have a question, Councillor Ketchum?
Question on procedure, Madam Warden, and perhaps I've misinterpreted, but the amendment, the motion is for an amendment to amend the motion, but there was already a motion on the floor.
So we have to vote on the first motion.
The amendment.
Okay, that's fine. Yep, no problem. So we'll vote on the first motion and then we'll proceed with what Councillor Purcell has suggested.
You can vote on the amendment.
Vote on the amendment first.
Okay, whatever suits council. All right, we'll vote on that first then. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. And now?
Motion as amended. Now there's motion as amended.
Motion as amended, which I just relayed to council.
And everybody's clear with that? Okay, so all those in favor of that resolution? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move into council correspondence. So there's 4 items here, so it's consent agenda. Are there any comments about that? I guess we'll have the motion to read it, and then we'll see if there is anyone who has any questions.
Certainly be it resolved that correspondence items number 7.2.1 to 7.2.4 be received and filed.
Moved by Councillor Jones and seconded by Councillor Mennel. Are there any questions or comments concerning the consent agenda?
Lost tonight.
Correspondence.
Yeah, is through you, Madam Warren, just the resolution from, I believe it's Aurora regarding the yeah, that at our municipality, we supported that resolution for the simple fact that we are currently going through a tribunal hearing that has delayed some development that was outlined in the official plan that it was allowed, but because an individual had the opportunity to appeal, not severance, but the rezoning, has held that up for a good number of months. I think that, you know, the tribunal in one case is fine, but I think for frivolous appeals to the tribunal should come with some jeopardy, because for, you know, $400 and not a lawyer, you can hold up things for months. So I think that there's some certainly some thought that needs to be given around this process, that we go through a great amount of time with our public to create our official plans, and it's a public document that certainly has opportunity for public scrutiny But then again, if someone, for whatever reason, just doesn't like a development that's maybe in their backyard, they have the opportunity to hold that up for an indeterminate amount of time. And, you know, it's certainly not conducive to things moving forward when we need housing in our community. So I don't know whether anybody has any discussion on that.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Madam Warden. And actually, Southwold didn't support it for the main reason, and I don't disagree that sometimes there are frivolous ones, and we're probably going through one right now, but it is a democratic society. Our biggest concern was if you have a neighbor, this neighboring municipality decides to change their official plan, that could affect your own municipality, you have no process to appeal that at that point if you dissolve the land tribunal. The land tribunal does come in handy at some point. Yes, there are frivolous ones. I think it could be better than it is, but we had to disagree with this one from Southwold's perspective.
Councillor Ketchapah.
Thank you, Madam Warden, and no disrespect to my colleagues. I agree with Councillor Jones' comments there. And the question I would have to put forward to someone more educated than I would be, would the avenue of appeal been available as described by Councillor McPhail through the former LPAT or through the OMB, the municipal board? If those avenues of appeal were available at those organizations, and if you dismantle the land tribunal now, what avenue of appeal is there then to take its place? So before, you know, council adopts a motion to support Aurora, I would like perhaps some edification from someone more learned than I on what the pros and cons of taking such action would be.
Julie, do you have any comments about what Councillor Ketchapah just said?
Sorry, no, Brian May.
Perhaps Brian has some comments?
Through you, Madam Warden, I don't have anything to offer at this time.
Councillor Mark?
Yeah, I know we've had frustrations with the OMB and the LPAT. The biggest frustration often has been the length of time they take to make a decision. It isn't, I think we do need, I would agree with Councillor Jones, we need an appeal board. We need a place that appeals can be made. All I would suggest that we should be telling them they need to make their decisions. I know the last two we had took 1.5 years each. And that's way too long to make a decision. The hearing was held, but there was 1.5 years before we got the.
Councillor McPhail?
Yeah, certainly, I don't get me wrong here that I feel the need to take away the appeal process. But I think internally that they need to reform the process and make it more efficient. And certainly I think that if someone is passionate enough that they would appeal it, I know that it's very frustrating for me that this is developed through the official plan. The additional costs that we're incurring by defending it, by hiring our lawyer to defend it, our planner to defend it. I think that somehow or other they need to look internally into the operation of the LPAT, because I think it was supposed to be more streamlined than the Ontario Municipal Board, but it's just the same horse with a different name.
So what am I hearing then, Councillor McPhail? Are we having a discussion, or do you, okay, maybe you were looking for something a bit more than that. Councillor Ketchapah.
I'm just wondering, Madam Warden, whether it's worth tasking staff to do a bit of a dive on this and bring us back a recommendation on which way to go.
Okay, be pleased to do so.
Is that okay with the rest of council? I think that'd be the best approach.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other conversation notes, like because of the correspondence? Is there anything else that caught your eye that you'd like to talk about? Okay, Julie, do we have direction then? Like, I can't remember exactly.
That we received.
Just receive and file, but should we add what Councillor Ketchapah has suggested?
And that staff be directed to provide a follow-up report with respect to Ontario Land Tribunal and LPAT reform.
Does that sound suitable to Counselor Ketchba? All right, I guess with no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So under other business, statements, inquiries by members. Deputy Warden Marks.
I remember last weekend, it sort of hit me, I looked at my calendar, I guess, and I realized that we were originally scheduled to attend Good Roads, which because of COVID was postponed, but all of a sudden it's getting near. When's it, 10th of April or when?
April 24th to the 27th.
So it's coming up. I'm just curious how many are going from here?
April 10th.
I think it's a
10th to the 13th.
13th, yeah.
something.
I know I'm going. We have
Like
quite a
several
few.
members are going,
Is
yes.
that a county council? We have to change the date of county council.
Yes.
Yes.
We
we've
could have
discussed
one
that.
down in Toronto or?
Yeah, we've discussed that and we haven't come up with a date yet. As you all know, I think you received. Yes.
Something else I was gonna mention about too.
Delegation.
Oh, yes, delegation. And Madam Warden, you're not going?
I can't attend, unfortunately. No.
So we need to, I guess, if I'm there, if we have delegations, we need to discuss that and have any requests or?
So I have 3 recommended delegations for council's consideration.
Okay.
One would be the removal of the Highway 3 bypass through Central Elgin, designation through Central Elgin. Second would be Elgin Regional Transit Implementation Funding. The third would be Wonderland Road, Ron McNeil Line, and Highway 3 implementation funding. So I recommend that those delegations be led by Deputy Warden Marks in the absence of Warden French. And since several councillors are attending, then we can divide and conquer and kind of partner up to undertake these delegations.
I'd certainly be happy to do that and certainly glad to be assisted.
First, I believe it was Counselor Ketchba and then Counselor Martin.
I was just wondering if there's any interest in swinging the cat again at Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry on gas tax properties.
Certainly.
Counselor Martin.
The other thought I had was our concern that we as a that with the balance of voting and delegates for the Thames Valley Board in the future, whether it would be wise to meet with the Minister of Education as well and say that we really believe that the rural needs to have a balance, it needs to be an equal vote, not one dominating the other, because I really fear what will happen if that occurs.
They're not in attendance, I don't believe.
Yeah, not for good.
Not in attendance at Good Roads. Maybe we should have a delegation, or have we sent I assume we sent a letter endorsing it already? No?
Sorry, with respect to the
Where London is requesting 7 votes and reducing Middlesex to 1.
Yeah, so that was follow-up from council's previous meeting.
Right, thank you. I just wanted to enforce it, that's all.
Is there any further discussion of what delegations there will be at the conference? And I thank you, Deputy Warden Marks. I talked to Julie about that yesterday and I said, by all means, I can't go, but I'm happy that you're able to. And I guess if there's no further discussion about that, notice of motion and matters of urgency, Julie?
Through you, Madam Warden, I would request that council consider 2 additional closed session items for addition to the agenda today. The first is titled Financial Services and the second is an organizational review, both allowed under the Municipal Act Section 239.2. And I ask that those be considered as items number 2 and 3.
Now, will those be added to the resolution when we get to it then, Julie, or do you want to cover that now?
Now,
Okay, could you read out the actual resolution, please?
Elgin County Council consider 2 additional closed session items The first titled Financial Services, second Organizational Review, both allowable under the Municipal Act, Section 239.2.
Okay, someone to move, Counselor Purcell and Counselor Jones. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And closed meeting.
Be it resolved that we do now proceed into closed meeting session in accordance with the Municipal Act.
I still believe you had statements. Did I miss that?
Yeah, we already went through statements, Deputy Warden,
Oh, okay, I didn't catch it.
his statement, but if you have a statement.
I just something I think for council's consideration, and for those of you that have been watching the unfoldings in Ukraine in the last little bit, kind of what I have taken away from this is the vulnerability of cyber attacks. And, you know, we have had discussions about cyber attacks and our maybe shortfallings within our organization because of that. And we have brought a new IT department manager or department head in place. I've not, or maybe I've missed the fact that I've not seen a report back as to what is the situation in our IT department. How far have we moved the ball forward in the last little while to make sure that we are not under the potential of any type of interference? And so is it something that I know I would like to see, and I would just like some comments from council if there's a willingness, and I don't like people writing reports just to write reports, but I think it's important that we have a good understanding of where we are in our IT department from where we were previously.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Julie.
Just to clarify through you, Madam Warden, to Councillor McPhail, does this extend beyond just cyber attacks
No.
to departmental improvements as well? Just
Exactly. I just want to know, and certainly giving Jeff the opportunity to familiarize himself with the department and the staff and the operations of the county. I think we're at the point now that we should have a very comprehensive report back on IT, where it was, where it is, where it's going.
Are there any further comments? This. Okay, Julie, is that enough direction? Do we have to have any resolution or anything?
I think perhaps that would be helpful
Yeah.
to have that as a motion that would have to be directed.
So you're going to move it, Councillor.
Whatever I said.
Bell, and who would like to second that? Councillor Jiguer. And I'll have Julie read the resolution.
Could I have Doug
Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Purcell.
repeat what he said?
That's why we're recording.
We'll let Julie repeat what Councillor McPhail said. Go ahead, Julie.
That staff, that the Director of Information Technology Services be directed to provide a comprehensive report to council detailing departmental improvements over the past year at the next meeting of county.
Sure. And what,
Future
where are we going from here?
Okay, everyone's good with the resolution? Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. And thank you. So now we'll move to closed meeting. I should stop. Is there any other statements? Sorry. Okay. We'll move to closed meeting.
Be it resolved that we do now proceed into closed meeting session in accordance with the Municipal Act to discuss the following matters under the Municipal Act, Section 239.2, property matter.
Okay, so someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Warden Marks and Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that's carried. And would you like to have a break now?
As well, right?
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Motion to rise and report.
Be it resolved that we do now rise and report.
Moved by Councillor Mennel and seconded by Councillor Ketchabah. All those in favor? And that's carried. In camera item number 1.
Be it resolved that the report from staff be received.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Jones and Deputy Warden Marks. All those in favor? And that's carried. Number 2.
Closed session item number 2, which was financial services update, be it resolved that staff proceed as directed.
Someone to move, Counselor Ketchabah, and seconded by Counselor Jiguer. All those in favor? And that's carried. Item number 3.
Which was an organizational update. Be it resolved that staff proceed as directed.
Okay, moved by Counselor Jones and seconded by Counselor McPhail. All those in favor? And that's carried. Motion to adopt recommendations from the Committee of the Whole.
Be it resolved that we do now adopt recommendations from the Committee of the Whole.
Someone to move, Counselor Mennel and Counselor Martin. All those in favor? And that's carried. Consideration of bylaws.
Be it a first, second, and third read of bylaw 22-15, being a bylaw to provide for the adoption of the 2022 budget of the Corporation of the County of Elgin and to establish the 2022 tax ratios and 2022 tax rates for the said corporation of the County of Elgin and its constituent lower tier municipalities.
Okay, moved by Counselor Ketchabah and seconded by Counselor Mennel. Are there any questions or comments concerning this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And the next resolution, please.
The first, second, and third read of bylaw 22-16, being a bylaw to amend the schedule to bylaw number 20-05, being a consolidated bylaw for the regulation of traffic, including parking on county roads.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Counselor Martin and Deputy Warden Marks, are there questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next one, please.
Be it a first, second, and third read of bylaw 22-17, being a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the Municipal Council of the Corporation of the County of Elgin at the March 8th, 2022 meeting.
Someone to move, someone to second. Counselor Jones and seconded by Counselor Mennel. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And the next resolution?
Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 12:17 PM to meet again on March 22nd, March 2022 at 9:00 AM.
Deputy Warden Marks and Counselor Purcell, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. And thank you, everyone.